Hi, everybody. I'm Barbara Corcoran. It's my pleasure to be here today with all of you at Trip Actions. I think we're going to spend some time together and have a good time. I have a story to tell you, so just sit back and relax because there's no notes to take on this one. I was born in a little town in New Jersey named Edgewater, and it was right on the foot of the George Washington Bridge. We looked at New York City from our windows in our house. We had a 3-family house and we occupied the bottom floor of the house, and we had 10 kids, and we were the biggest family in our town. And I had a lot of pride about that. My mother put her 6 girls in the girls' room, her 4 boys in the boys' room, and my mother and father produced every one of those kids from the living room couch. We're each a year and a half apart. My parents were devout Catholics, and they listened to the Pope and they practiced the Pope's rhythm method. My dad was an amazing dad for us. He worked 2 jobs his whole life to support us well. He was a printing press foreman in the daytime, and at night he would wash trucks. And my dad on weekends never worked, and he was the most popular dad in town. Why? Because he was our playmate. My dad had a weird sense of fun. On a snowy day, he would put his 10 kids on a wooden ladder, shove us down the side yard, over a retaining wall, and into oncoming traffic until my mother put her foot down and stopped all the fun. His idea of fun was a blast as kids. We couldn't wait to play with my dad more than any other playmate we even had in our hometown. My dad was also an amazing example of insubordination. And as a result of him modeling what insubordination was, 9 out of 10 of his kids became entrepreneurs, me being one of them. His sense of what a boss should do is just tell you what to do until the boss told you something you didn't want to do. And my dad would just tell the boss to go shove his job up where the moon don't shine. That was his closing line, and get fired. And so my mother and father constantly struggled with meeting the bills, raising us, because my dad lost his job, and it would be weeks before he would find another job, and then we'd be off and running again. My mom was the leader of our house, even though she let my dad believe he was the leader. She was the most organized and probably the most liked woman in town. She ran her house just like a boot camp, and there was a place for everything. She was an organizational genius, I now realize as an adult looking back. She would put her girls' socks all in one drawer, all the same size, all white, and the boys' socks in another drawer, all navy blue, all the same size. So her 10 kids getting out for school in the morning just had to reach in, could almost be a blind kid, grab the socks and put any 2 on your feet. And they always matched. And she ran the household with those kind of systems throughout the entire household. If she ever had to do one thing more than twice, she thought of a system or a shortcut. My mother also had a much more powerful gift than being a drill sergeant for all of us. Her most powerful gift was she saw the light in everybody, the neighborhood, and most importantly, her kids. She would declare on the birth of each child what she thought their gift was, and then she would make us perform our gift for the rest of our lives while we were living under her roof. So for my brother Tommy, she declared he was going to be a wonderful ballet dancer. Like, why? Because as an infant, she unwrapped his legs, they were chubby, and he was kicking like crazy. And so she said, he's going to be a wonderful ballet dancer. And that's exactly what he became. For me, she said, I had a wonderful imagination. And so when Sister Stella Marie sent me home from school telling me I was going to be stupid just because I couldn't learn to read or write, my mother said, don't worry about it, Barbara Ann. You have a wonderful imagination and you learn to fill in all the blanks. And that's exactly what I did. So she chose to see the positive in her children, and she chose to put them in the role of performing all those positive traits. We had no choice. And along the way, we all fell for it and we all believed her. And that's the way it worked. If we ever had an argument with my mother, she wouldn't even dabble in arguments. She would say, you're both punished, and both kids would get punished. So we never went to her very often, that's for sure. Now jump forward with me. I'm 23 and I'm working one of my many jobs that I always worked after school at the Fort Lee Diner. I was 23 and competing with the best attraction in all of the New Jersey area, which was Gloria the waitress. She had a gimmick that couldn't be beat, and I couldn't compete with it. She would take 2 coffee cups, double stacked in each hand, and stack 2 more in her huge chest, and the men would come from miles to sit at her counter. When I was complaining to my mom that night that it's unfair that Nick, the diner manager, didn't make men sit evenly at our 2 different counters, she told me, why don't you just stay as sweet as you are, maybe braid up your hair and put red ribbons on those pigtails, and the men will be attracted to you too. And that's exactly what I do. And what do you think happened that night? That was the night I got my first lucky break. Simone walked in and looked at me and looked at Gloria and chose to sit at my counter. And I found that night that men are just as attracted to the great white virgin as they are to the blonde bombshell. And that was my corner on marketing. The first time I realized there was a difference in how you present yourself. And so Ray offered me a ride home that night. He said his real name was Ramon Simone with an accent on each word, and that he was from the Basque Country. My parents hated Ramon Simone on sight. They didn't understand why a man that old, he was 30, I was 23. They couldn't imagine what he saw in a girl my age. Well, I knew what he saw in me, and I knew what I was seeing in him. And then about 2 weeks later, he offered to take me to New York City and put me into the Barbizon Hotel for Women, very respectable hotel, no men allowed. I told my mom and dad I was going to do that on a week's vacation. They thought I was a prostitute, but I rode off to New York because at that age, at 23, I knew everything, and I wasn't there to please my parents. When Ray left me out at the Barbizon Hotel on Lexington and 63rd Street in New York City, I was amazed. I had never seen New York City, even though I only lived 2 miles from the city. Everything about the city changed dramatically from one night to the next, and I thought, this is the city for me. On the way out of his car door that day, Ray handed me a crisp $100 bill and said, Barbara, why don't you go to Bloomingdale's and buy yourself a real New York outfit? I was starting to think that my mother was right in saying I was a prostitute, but I took that 100 and I bought myself a lavender outfit, lavender stretch top, lavender pants, lavender boots, and I came back down Lexington Avenue that night singing Georgie Girl. The next day, I knew I would never return to New Jersey. I found myself a new job answering phones at a reception desk for the Giafuni brothers, and I kept that job for about a year. Hello, Giafuni brothers, Giafuni brothers, Giafuni brothers. I was working the Giafuni brothers shifts for about a year and a half, and Ray one day said, you have a great personality. You do great in real estate sales. And he offered to give me a $1,000 loan to start a real estate business. Where else would I have gotten that loan from? No one. I didn't know any people with money. And so I took the $1,000. He took 51% of the company. I got 49%. That was fair. He explained he was the managing partner. And I started the company named after both of us, Corcoran Simone. I kept the accent on the Simone. Years later, I would find that his real name wasn't Ramon Simone. It was Ray Simon, and he wasn't from the Basque Country. He was from 145th Street. Who knew? From the very first day in business, sitting at my sublease desk in an accountant's office, a team of one, I saw myself differently. I answered the phone, hello, Corcoran Simone, and I saw myself as the queen of New York real estate. It was like it actually was there. That's how crystal clear it was to me. And I made that my business plan for the rest of my career. I decided I was going to be the queen of New York real estate. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I sure as heck knew I was going to get there. And that's what I worked on for the next 7 years with Ramon Simone as the head of Corcoran Simone, until one night he came home while I was making the pasta for his 3 kids, because I was living with him and his children by that point. And I was pouring it into the sink, and Ramon came home and said, Barbara, we have something serious to discuss. Oh, yes, Ray, I said, as I looked up through the pasta steam, thinking I must be looking beautiful through the steam. And he said, yes, I'm going to marry your secretary. My secretary, Tina? Tina? Tina was prettier than me. She was 5 years younger than me. And he was in love with Tina. He told me to take my time moving out. I took about a minute, grabbed my toothbrush, and moved onto the sofa of my best friend in New York City on East 79th Street. I couldn't believe that Ray left me for a younger woman. Where was I? How did I not know that was coming? And so for the next better part of a year, I went into work every day. And now Tina was sharing the office with Ray. She was the new wife. And I saw them giggling every day inside, holding hands, and it just broke my heart. It took me about a year, as I recall, to get the courage to walk in one Friday morning, and I said, hey, Ray, guess what? We're ending this business today. We're going to go our own ways, and this is how we're going to do it. You can pick the best salesperson. I'll pick the next. You pick the third. I pick the fourth. And we chopped up that business exactly like a football draft. He picked Norma Hirsch, the top salesperson. I picked Esther Kaplan, not the top salesperson, but a smart, organized woman, and I thought that she was golden. And then we divided the company into 2 groups of 7. I brought my 7 people into the foyer, and I said, hey, guess what? On Monday, we're moving to a new office. We are, they said. Yes, where? They said, it's a surprise, because it was a surprise to me, too. And so I visited my landlord, rented the 11th floor right over Ray's 8th floor because he wanted to stay. He wanted me to go. And that became the Corcoran Group. I named it the Corcoran Group because I knew I was going to need the help of every single person as a group to make a go of it. We had divided the money into two piles. I had $17,000. That was not a lot of overhead. We divided the receivables. We had very few receivables. And I knew it was going to be nothing short of a miracle if I could make it on my own. But by Monday morning, when my 7 salespeople came in, I had already gotten metal desks from 42nd Street, had them towed up to the office building. They put them in place. I had phones installed. I had everybody's possessions moved, and I had a welcome letter on everybody's box with the ribbon. That was such an exciting day, but it was also the scariest day of my life. I should not fail to mention that on the way out the door on that Friday, Ramon said, "Oh, Barbara, there's one more thing. You know you'll never succeed without me." And I felt like a knife in my heart. I thought I would rather die than let you not see me succeed. And I can tell you that fueled me for the next 17 years until I was able to prove him wrong. And I sold my business for $66 million cash. Thank God. I wonder without the power of that insult, if I would stay through the thick and thin with all the trenches that were to ensue in my business and all the hard times that I didn't think I had an answer for, because I would always think of Ramon's last words to me, and I would think of one more thing to try to make a go of it, and then it would be just what was needed, and then the market would change and save me again. I built my company, the Corcoran Group, using great marketing and great fun. Those were the two things I was good at. Here's how I used marketing to build the Corcoran Group. I discovered it quite by accident, but once I was on it, boy, oh boy, I knew how it worked. I was sitting in my office one day in a terrible real estate market when one of my complaining salespeople comes in and complains that I'm not advertising. Yeah. I thought if I had a gun on my desk, I would take it out and shoot her. But instead I said to her, I'm working on something, a big idea. We can't advertise now, but this big idea is going to bring a lot of customers. You wait and see. And I got her out of the office and I sat there thinking, what the heck do I do? And here's what I did. I took my 11 sales for the year, I added them up and I divided by 11, and I came out with an average sale price, $54,850 some odd dollars. And I took that average sales price and I typed in on a piece of paper, average New York City sale price, put that number in. Then it looked kind of lonely. And I put, needs a title. I put the Corcoran Report. And then underneath it, I typed conditions and trends in the greater New York City marketplace with that one number in the middle. And that afternoon, I folded that paper many, many times and I mailed it off to anyone who wrote for the New York Times, because reporters always put their bylines there, and heard nothing. But 1 week later, a miracle happened. I opened up the New York Times, the front page of the real estate section. The headline is, New York City prices hit all-time low. And the first line of that is, according to Barbara Corcoran of the Corcoran Group. I thought it was one of those Catholic miracles my mother always told us would happen to us. I couldn't believe my eyes. I cut that out, that phrase. I went into the office and I taped it on my phone, and I knew I had found a real estate partner. You know why? Because our phones started ringing that following Monday morning because people were giving us their listings. They didn't give us our listings before that, and now they were giving us our listings. I, for the first time, heard one of my salespeople not spell our company name. People knew how to spell it. What had changed? I'll tell you what had changed: the power of marketing, the power of a third-party endorsement, the power that I got in one day, the difference between one day and another, that people listened to what I had to say, or at least read what I had to say. And I realized I had to do a lot more of this. And so the next thing I produced was when I read that Madonna was pregnant with the baby. She was the it girl back then. I broadcast it with a Madonna report on what Madonna would be looking for: a doorman, a beautiful view, top security, the same thing everybody rich in New York looks for. She needed another bedroom, no kidding. And you know what? I was invited to 3 or 4 news stations that week on the 11 o'clock news, where I was introduced as the broker to the stars. What an amazing second miracle, because I had published the Madonna report. And it went on and on and on. When we got Richard Gere as our first real celebrity customer, we sold him a tiny studio in Greenwich Village. He painted it purple and made it a temple. Kind of weird stuff he was into, I guess. But anyway, I published a Richard Gere report, and on and on and on it went. And so when we had 50 salespeople, we looked like we had 200. By the time we had 200, because of how much publicity we constantly got, people thought we had 500. By the time we had 1,000, I think people thought we ruled the world. That's how I used marketing. I also used it for gimmicks to sell property when no property was being sold. And interestingly enough, it opened the doors to whole new pastures of power. I remember sitting and spending our $77,000 profit, the first profit I ever had, on Homes on Tape, which is simply a device I thought was a genius idea. Put all of our properties on videotape long before the advent of the internet. Nobody wanted the tapes. And as I sat looking at the tremendous loss of stacked tapes that nobody wanted, that cost $77,000, I was sick to my stomach. But then I heard from my husband, who was a Navy captain, a part-time Navy captain, that the US government had this new thing they played war games on called the internet. The internet, how does that work? I asked. Oh, it's like we have the battles in real time, he explained. And so the next morning I took our old videotapes and I stuck them up on this newfangled thing called the internet. Well, what do you think happened? First week, boom, boom, we had 2 sales. And I was on to the new thing that was about to change the real estate industry. And we were on it for almost 2 years before anybody else was on it. Do you know what I did first thing? I registered all the URLs of all of my competition, not because I wanted to control their business, but I wanted to know when they woke up. And I found out that the biggest people in the industry, my biggest competitors, woke up last. The little competitors called, hey, can I get my URL back? But still not even for a good 6-month period. What an advantage it was to be able to market with the internet long before everybody else did. And so the business went on. We were always early. We were always first. We were always willing to try things. And that gave us the power of marketing. The second tool I used to build my business, and for me was my favorite tool, was the ability to create fun. My first fun event, I decided, was going to be a surprise party for my salespeople. We only had perhaps 30 people at the time. We would soon grow to 1,000 people strong. But with those 30 people, we had never done a fun event. And I said, dress up on Friday night, your best outfits, wear all your jewelry. We're going on a fun event. Where are we going? It's a surprise. At the time, I only had one Black salesperson, V. Wilson, and V had the best idea of all. She said, let's take everybody on a slow tour on an open-air bus through Harlem. We'll scare the crap out of them. Great idea. And so as everybody came down all coiffed and beautiful, we took those ladies up on a slow tour of Harlem on a hot August night. People were scared to death. By the time we came home on Monday morning, the office was abuzz. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. People had a blast. And I saw for the first time living examples of fun creating camaraderie. For the first time in my business, I saw that I could use fun to bring people together, to give them a chance to see each other differently than they saw each other at the office, to see each other in a different light, laughing, drinking too much, and most importantly, I found having new ideas. I soon found out that the more fun I created, the more creative the company became until we were the creative powerhouse in our industry, because I found that when people were having fun and drinking too much and laughing and dressing as people they normally don't dress at or whatever I could dream up, I found that they were always thinking of new ideas, and there I was with my yellow pad taking them down. And so we had shoe shine boys that came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays to shine everybody's shoes. On Mondays and Wednesdays, we had masseuses at the desks. In February, we had the sweetheart parties where people had to dress up as somebody they never were. We always had a theme. We had 1940s, roaring 20s, 1960s, Broadway, dress as nuns, cross-dress, whatever it was I could dream up, and people would come and laugh, and we had the best parties in town. That became a tremendous recruiting source, because why would anybody work for another company when they could come work for mine, get the same commission splits, the same advertising, the same lovely desk, when they could come with me and get all those extra fun things that made us the creative company in town. And so that's how I built the Corcoran Group. I've shared with you the 2 ways I built the Corcoran Group, but the other very important thing I didn't discuss with you is the trait that built the Corcoran Group, and that was a trait called persistence. If I wasn't persistent on every bend along the way when people said you couldn't, or I actually couldn't, and didn't rebound like a jack in the box that comes up out of the box and gets pushed down, bang, pushed down, bang, pushed down. If I didn't have the low IQ where I couldn't have the intelligence to stay low, okay, I would have never succeeded at building my company. And I found that my salespeople, the great salespeople, shared the exact same trait. What would happen is I would look at 1,000 salespeople and ask myself all the time, my gosh, what's the difference between the people making $3 million a year and everybody else who seems to have an average income of about $54,000? What's the difference? Was it their contacts? Sometimes in getting started. Was it how hard they worked? No, everybody worked hard. What was the magic difference? And I came to the conclusion that the only difference between the phenomenal salespeople and everyone else was not how many hits they took in sales, it's a rejection business, but how long they laid low. That's all I found out. The great salespeople didn't take much time feeling sorry for themselves. They got back up and went on with it. And that's what I did. That's what they did. And today on Shark Tank, that's what my top entrepreneurs do. There's absolutely no difference. It's the ability to brush themselves off and get right back up. And that's what gets everybody to the finish line. We've come through such difficult times in the last year and a half of the business cycle. And I could tell you, every time I came through a tough time in the real estate cycles, over the 20 some odd years I was in the business, we always made up for lost time. Don't forget that. I found that every tough time was followed more quickly than you ever saw it would come. Really good times. Don't lose sight of that. We've come through tough times, and I'm telling my entrepreneurs who I work with, don't be fooled. Every one of your competitors, the bigger they are falling asleep at the wheel. And that's what I found. The bigger the company is, the less they do in tough times. They wait it out. This is the time to pull ahead of your competition. It's just one of the best opportunities I have seen in the last 20 years. And so my great entrepreneurs are already pulling ahead. Well, the great majority of the entrepreneurs that I've invested in are waiting it out. Do not wait it out. Think about what you can do totally differently than you've done before. Reassess your business, where you get your customers from, how you close your customers, what services you could offer, what you should emphasize, how you could meet with them differently. Re-examine every single piece of your business, because the reward for doing that is amazing, and it's not going to happen probably for another 10 years. So take advantage of these past tough times that you're coming out of in the travel industry. You've gotten hit the hardest, and the people who get hit the hardest get rewarded the most. Make sure you take advantage of it. That would be my message. You know your business. I don't know your business. I know my business, but I know business. And I can smell it a mile away that we're about to go into the best times in business overall, especially in your business. So thank you. Pay attention to what I'm telling you. You'll say, she was right, only 4 months from now. And it's really been a very big pleasure to spend time with you. I hope you've gotten something out of this.